Indeed it is. It's coming up to 16 minutes past midday on Thursday the 24th of November, and I've been joined in the studio by John G. Smith. Now, he is a financial guy and he knows what's happening in the world, and he's going to probably just tell us a little bit about where we are now, what's happened. John, welcome to Lincoln City Radio.
Thank you, Malcolm.
You're from Nottingham.
I am, yes. We live now in North Nottinghamshire.
Mm-hmm.
A long time we lived in Ravenshead, in fact, which is just 10 miles north. Now we're much nearer to Tuxford, almost on the Lincolnshire border.
I know Tuxford very well. I used to go to a pub there many years ago. That's a different story. John, what's your background? You've been involved in finance for, well, all your life.
Yes, after I qualified as an accountant, I joined Pricewaterhouse, which is now PricewaterhouseCoopers. But I didn't join on the technical side. I joined on the management consultancy side. And so that's the sort of job that takes you from business to business and place to place. I had a long spell around the UK, but then I volunteered to go and join the Singapore Malaysian firm. So I was quite a young man, really. I went out to the Far East, which I never regretted. I had a really good time out there. We took our two boys there too, and did an 18-month contract out there, and we've been back since to have a look at how it's changed, which it has dramatically. Singapore's a very, very vibrant city.
I understand, yes.
Yes. And then when I came back again, I resumed working for them in the UK, and I was lucky enough to go on another big overseas job. I went on an assignment in southern India, Cochin, which is in Kerala state, which has been in the news a lot lately, and then progressed as one does over time up through the ranks until, as happens I think a lot in consultancy, you meet a chairman of a company, he kind of likes the job you've done or how it went, and says, if you ever want to leave the profession, give me a ring, which is what happened with me, and I joined industry.
Just when you were doing the consultancy, well, what's your actual role consulting? Are you telling people how to run their business?
Well, it does vary a lot on the terms of reference you've got, but mostly you'll be put in there to solve a problem, I suppose, in essence. There'll be a difficulty which the senior people, the board, don't think they're going to solve internally. Perhaps they feel they're too close to it. It might be too political to handle. But it'll be a problem that they want to pass to an outsider. And a firm like PricewaterhouseCoopers, as it is now, very often are ideally suited because they may know the business through their audit or taxation or other specialist functions. So they may put consultants in to take a look with some knowledge already there. On the other hand, it may be absolutely independent, and they may want someone who's got no contact with the business at all. But primarily, and usually initially, it's a kind of an analysis task. It's finding out what's going wrong here and what's going right and what needs to be done.
You had some good clients when you were at Price Waterhouse, didn't you? There's a list here which you've given me. National Exhibition Centre, for instance.
Yes.
You went in to sort them out. I assume did they have trouble?
When we first got involved in the NEC, it didn't actually exist. I know that sounds very strange, but it was after the city of Birmingham had conceived that they wanted such an exhibition centre. They wanted it specifically to compete with Olympia. They wanted to bring that sort of business, and particularly the car show, into the Midlands. And city of Birmingham had found the funds to do it, and Pricewaterhouse just happened to be the firm they chose to put the financial systems and procedures in place, and that's where I was involved.
And also you were involved with Cadbury McVitie cakes.
Yes, I was, yes.
You weren't making the cakes, you were obviously trying and make the dough go longer.
Yes. Now that is a classical example of something that didn't go the way it should have done.
Right.
The story, I can't say that it was necessarily ever proved to be true, but the story was the chairman of the two respective firms were having a game of golf, and they decided that in one case their mainstream was cakes, in another case it was biscuits, and one said to the other, why don't we put our little sideline, merge them two together, and let's make a big cake business. And that's exactly what happened. But as I found out throughout my career, very often when that happens, they don't merge, gel, as one would like them to do. And there was a lot of conflict internal, a lot of problems arose.
Okay, but you've sorted them out.
Well,
basically, well, you think you have. Okay, we'll take a piece of music now, John. The first track you picked is a Frank Sinatra track, That's Life. Any particular reason why that one?
yes, I think it mirrors the experience of quite a few of us, certainly myself, where, you know, you look back and you think, well, I've been up and I've been down, and I've had this experience and that experience, and this kind of sums it up beautifully in words, I feel.
Okay, so here's the governor.
Which is located at Leangate in Nottingham. And Belfruit itself had two really big sides to it. It had the manufacturing plant, which still exists, which actually makes fruit machines and other pieces of leisure equipment. And then there's what was called the operating side, which ran the machines out in premises such as pubs and clubs and so on. And I first went in on that side.
So were you the guy that went in and programmed it to say that you only pay out one in £5,000 or something like that?
No, they were the people who are now commonly known as software engineers.
Right.
At the time I'm talking about, they were regarded as long-haired boffins with rings in strange places who hid behind doors, and nobody quite knew what they did.
Yeah.
But what they did do was program a machine to do these compensate, pay out certain percentages, and come up with these really interesting games. A fact that people might be interested in is we were inventing a new game approximately every 6 weeks.
Really?
Because that's about the span of interest of somebody who understands these. After about 6 weeks, they're getting to know them quite well, so time to find something new.
John, just looking at that, and the machines, you've probably seen them in pubs now, they are so complicated to use, aren't they? I just can't get my head around them.
Incredibly complicated, and I was looking at one only a few days ago, and the other thing is it pays out a lot of money these days, whereas in my day it was a very tiny amount, and the emphasis was very much on amusements, because the trade name for a fruit machine is an AWP, which stands for amusement with prizes. The emphasis was on amusement and not gambling.
I think it has gone more gambling now, hasn't it? Definitely.
It has.
Okay, shall we move on from the gambling side
yes.
and when you were using those machines?
Yes.
You went to work for the Department of Trade and Industry, and then you moved on and done various things since then, and you ended up 1992 to 2008 at a firm called Angus McRae Interiors.
Yes. That's always been a part-time interest for me. In fact, I've been talking to Angus himself this morning. What happened with the DTI was that at the time they had an enterprise initiative which was partly funded by government, and we as consultants were sent out to different businesses, again in the way I was mentioning before, really, to solve certain problems. And a few of those, you know, sort of stick in the sense that they want you to come back and perhaps keep an interest rather than doing a short, sharp job, and Angus McRae fell into that category along with quite a few others. They are furniture manufacturers in Nottingham, high quality furniture, for the leisure industry mainly, not exclusively but mainly. For example, today there's an order being put together literally today for Hard Rock Cafe in Paris, and next week it'll be Lisbon. In September, when I was over there, it was in Florence. So that's an example of a good British manufacturing business making high quality furniture latterly for export.
So that's what you've been doing. Now, what on earth made you take up writing?
Yes, I think, like a lot of people, as you go through life, you think, I think I could write, I would like to write, I would like to get something down for history, for my own personal catharsis and maybe satisfaction. And I did start to write, and over a 10-year period I produced what I regard as my main book, which is called Barn Door to Balance Sheet, which is I suppose an autobiographical track through life, but has a lot of asides, a lot of philosophical rantings and things of that nature. That led me on to a website, as you know, as technology moved on. And I started to write about current events on that website as I saw them, mainly financial, economic events.
Now, you sent me a book to read, and it's called, you can say it,
Quantitative Wheezing.
Quantitative Wheezing,
Yes.
and it's actually a diary of what happened at the end of 2008 through to 2010. Now, for those who will probably remember that, that was when we had the big recession. Everything went pear-shaped for everybody.
Yes.
Why did you decide to write it in a diary form?
As events started to unfold and were documented by leading commentators, and I was trying to track them, I think my main focus was trying to understand what was going on. I think, like a lot of people, I had no prior knowledge of bundling up strange debts in America. I had no idea that mortgages were being sold to people who really couldn't afford to repay them, and that some clever, perhaps one should say devious people, were wrapping these things up into a package and selling them on as safe investments with a high rate of return. I had no idea that was going on, and when Lehman Brothers collapsed in September '08, I thought, even if my own personal satisfaction, I'm going to have to log events as they start to unfold.
So as it all happened, every day you wrote the information down, and it's in the book,
Yes.
which I've got to admit, John, I haven't read every single page of it, as I'm sure you didn't expect me to.
No.
But some of it's quite interesting when, especially I look at banks in here, and I have 1 or 2 shares in Lloyd's TSB,
Yes.
and this is where they everything went pear-shaped with the banks as well, isn't it,
Yes,
in
it is.
2008-9.
Yes.
Are we now in a similar position to where we were then, with the fact that recently, what have they done? They put in the Bank of England's printed £75 billion.
Yes.
Is that doing that going to save the problem of where we were in 2008, 2010?
Yes, that is where the title of the book comes from. Quantitative wheezing is a play on words, a joke really, on the term quantitative easing, which many of your listeners, I think, will have read about,
Right.
heard of.
Yeah.
And colloquially in the papers, it tends to be referred to as printing money from the Bank of England. They don't literally print money. They go through another technical process, which we don't need to describe. But what it really means is we're trying to put money into the economy that wasn't there before in order to ease things up. There's a risk on one side of inflation, but on the other hand, we need to get things moving where the markets have clogged. That's where this term comes from.
Okay, we're going to take a break for a minute, and then when we come back, we're going to listen to your second track that you've asked me to play for you, Don McLean and Vincent. Why have you asked for that?
Oh, it's pure poetry, isn't it?
And the second choice of my guest in today, John Smith, and we're talking the finance. We've been talking about what happened in 2008 and 2010, and his book, The Quantitative... Do I say that word right, John? It's the...
I say quantitative.
Quantitative,
Yeah.
yes, okay, wheezing. It's a diary of the events which happened in 2008 and 2010. We were just saying off air, it's really a reference document. Somebody wants to go in and see what happened on a certain date.
It is, yes, and I think in order to spark memory, one of the sort of little tricks I tried to play in getting this into book form was to, at the end of beginning of each month, to put a little summary of world events way outside the financial arena, so that if people picked it up, for instance, and looked, for instance, at June 2009, as I've got here, they would remember that that's the month, for instance, the Air France Flight 447 disappeared, if you remember, coming back from South America. Michael Jackson died that month. And I think if people home in on that point in time and then read on, they'll see what was happening in this terrible credit crisis arena.
Interesting reference document. As I say, I did try and read half of it and did find some of it quite interesting when we're talking about the banks and the position the banks got themselves in. As an ex-banker, obviously, I'm quite interested in that. Can we just move forward now to where we are now? Because are we in the same situation as we were then? Well,
I think we are. I think the first real evidence of a a second credit crisis occurred as recently as yesterday. Because as you may have read, Malcolm, yesterday the German government tried to sell £5 billion pounds worth of their own bonds and failed to do so. They only sold a proportion of them, and the reason for that seems to be that they're still confident that they can price the bond highly with a very low return, only 2%, when, as we've heard, the Spanish, the Italian, the Greek bond yield is much higher, and consequently people just wouldn't buy the whole of their German debt. And if people won't buy German debt, that's a real freeze on the credit market as a whole again.
So if people don't buy the bond, what do they do?
What does Germany do?
What do they do if they can't sell them?
Well, they'll have to reissue. They'll have to reissue, and they'll have to lower the coupon price, the market price of the bond, to make it more attractive, which in turn will raise the yield on that bond. At the moment, it's pretty much stalemate. I mean, we've got a situation in Europe where debt can't be refinanced. In the case of Greece, the most extreme case now, they've written off anything up to 75% of the value of the bonds, which, people may know by any other name is simply an IOU. It's nothing much, just a piece of paper saying we promise to pay. If you write 75% of what you promised to pay off, that person to whom it's owed isn't going to be very pleased. No. And it's going to affect them, and it's going to affect their balance sheet, and it's going to affect their ability to pay their own debts. And so you get this, what in the paper is being called contagion. It's going to roll on and get worse and worse.
So where are we then, financially?
Very difficult to say. One assumes if Europe stays together at all, that's the Eurozone. There'll have to be fiscal union, just as there is monetary union, just as there's a common currency, the euro. One assumes there's going to have to be a common budget, and if there is, it can only come about by Germany completely altering its stance on what's happening.
Is that likely?
Doesn't seem likely at the moment, but appears to me inevitable.
Okay. How long is it going to take to get out of this if, say, Germany do agree to do something to make the whole position clearer? Years.
I mean, we'd be talking, in my view, 5 or 10 years at the minimum, because debt is there, it's accumulated over a long period of time. It has to be rolled over. It has to be refinanced, just as we would at home. We owe a lot of money either because we've bought a fancy car, we've bought a house, our circumstances have changed, we can't repay, or we can't repay as much as we were doing, would like to do, and we have to think about what do we do next? How do we get out of this situation? And really the only way you can get out of it is to try and replace that debt by, in effect, another debt, which may be over a longer period, try to make it cheaper. But it's not a problem that could ever go away.
And it's because is this country involved in it as such? Because we haven't gone into the euro currency wise.
No.
Why is it affecting us so dramatically?
Well, we're not in the eurozone, but we're in Europe.
Yeah.
We are part of the 27, and over 40% of all our exports go to Europe, not least to Ireland, strangely enough. Therefore, anything that affects their ability to trade, to be successful, to be commercial, is bound to bounce back onto the UK. There is no alternative to that. Our salvation really is to export more quality goods, and to outside Europe.
And was it a good move that we decided not to go into the euro as such?
Yes.
Because that would have been a walking disaster for us and probably for everybody else as well, wouldn't it? Because the sterling would have just disappeared, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would indeed. And one thing that I'm sure all the listeners will appreciate is that if you go into Europe now, I mean, we're in Italy in September, things are, by our standards, incredibly expensive. The Eurozone is a very expensive place for somebody from the UK to be in. Incredibly expensive.
John, I've just got one more question for you. Is there a possibility that the euro currency might disappear and the countries go back to where they were? Is that a possibility?
It's a possibility, but unlikely.
So really, they are stuck where they are at the moment with the euro as their currency?
They are.
Okay. John, thank you very much indeed for coming in. It's been a pleasure, and you've enlightened me on certain things, and I hope you have everybody out there as well. Just remind us, the book I am holding is The Diary. It's called The Quantitative
Wheezing.
Yes, and it's published by, probably you can tell me who it's published.
It's published by Lulu. It's available on Amazon. It's also available, Malcolm, in digital form, so Kindle.
Oh, right, okay.
You know, it doesn't have to be bought as a paperback. You know, it can be just downloaded.
Okay, and it's a reference document, so if you know anybody who's doing something in the financial market, taking exams, studying at university, well worth having as well. And the other book you've got, John, is the other one you brought in for me, is called From...
This is Barn Door to Balance Sheet.
Right, this is story of your life, really.
It is. It is.
Available in the same format?
Yes, again, Amazon or in digital format via Kindle or iPad, iPod. Yes, fully available. And I do, people might be tempted to have a... I mean, really, one final thing, Malcolm, is Barn Door to Balance Sheet really is not a story about me, it's a story about everyone. It's asking the question, where am I today? How on earth did I get here?
Interesting thing. And are you still keeping your diary with the events that are happening at the moment to probably edition 2 of your diary?
I think so.
You are?
I log key events and I post them on the website, which is the same name as the book, by the way.
Right, okay.
If anybody wants to just take a look at it. I try to log key events and comment upon them sensibly in language that I hope most people can understand.
Okay, well, it's very clear to me, and many thanks for coming in. We'll have to get you in again talking about where we are, and hopefully the stock market and everything will increase and we'll get more value at
We
the
hope
moment.
so, and I'd be delighted to, Malcolm, if invited.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed. One more track we're going to play for you. This was Ralph McTell.
Yes.
Any particular reason?
Yes, because I've spent a lot of my life in London, and I like to think I know the mean streets as well as the more glamorous side.
Okay, John, many thanks for coming in.
Thank you.